vocal critic of big tech's power, is introducing a bill that would stop anti-competitive mergers, strengthen enforcement, and push for civil fines for violators. Senator Klobuchar joins us this morning. She's also writing a book called AntiTrust, Taking on Monopoly Power from the Gilded Age to the Digital Age. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us, Senator.
Thank you.
Before we get directly into some of the antitrust issues that I know you're dealing with, I want to ask you actually about a market power tech question. And it's something that we've seen being played out even over the last week, because part of the power or market power issue is a bit of a freedom of speech issue and a bit about what these platforms can do. And I'm curious what your reaction is. We were just talking about Elon Musk tweeting and pushing Dogecoin this morning. We've seen this games week, and if not longer. What do you think the responsibility, if there is any, that the platforms themselves should have when it comes to pushing stocks?
You know, I think this is just one more example of this enormous power that these platforms have. And I'm glad in some of the other issues you guys were just talking about that Secretary Yellen has called for an investigation to look at this manipulation. You want to have small investors, you want to have people participating, but you don't want to have deliberate manipulation. And that's always a thin line. So I'm glad that this is being looked into, because you don't want behavior. Overall, with tech, I think we know for a long time they've pushed against any kind of rules of the road, saying, hey, trust us. And that just hasn't worked for people. It sure hasn't worked for people that have had their private information spit out all over the place. It hasn't worked for people who are victims of misinformation. And so that's why, in addition to antitrust, we have to get some rules of the road for privacy in place. And we've got to make sure that the economy is fair for people. And I look at this from a business perspective, which is a lot of your show. I don't think it's good for startups. I don't think it's good for competition if you have big companies with 90% market share over search engines, in the case of Google, that can control the gateways to things. And so that's why my bill and the work that we're doing, and the House has done a lot on this too, House of Representatives, is aimed at actually getting to what I consider a conservative principle, capitalism. This idea of competition in the marketplace. Adam Smith himself warned about the overgrown army of monopolies, and that we always had to have a check and balance, and we are rusty and we haven't kept up with the marketplace.
Senator, do you tie the issue of antitrust, though, with the idea of misinformation and potentially even manipulation? Because you're right, misinformation, which we've seen in the context of the election, manipulation, you know, in very many ways can be, you know, looked into in the same regard as this GameStop and the election in certain ways could be put into the same category.
Right. So the approaches may be different, because misinformation could involve rules and transparency policies and algorithms and those kinds of things. So in that way, it's a different set of rules that you'd put in place. And competition rules wouldn't just apply to tech, right? You've got, you know, only 2 really online travel agencies right now, or online travel companies, that are controlling all those brand names. You could go down the row with the consolidation we've seen in industry. But I think one thing they have in common, though, is that when you squelch competitors, and we have the Zuckerberg email as Exhibit A, when he talked about purchasing nascent competitors. They're not big now, but boy, they're going to affect us later. You squelch all the bells and whistles and the innovations that could come up from new companies, the WhatsApp, Instagram purchases. They no longer are off on their own trying to compete with Facebook. Facebook now owns them.
Senator, is the answer to break these companies up? Is the answer to prevent them, the biggest companies, from buying smaller companies? What do you think the ultimate resolution of this should be?
It's the law. The first answer is you've got to have the resources for the agencies. You can't take on trillion-dollar companies with Band-Aids and duct tape. Look back at AT&T breakup, which, by the way, AT&T's own chairman once said it was good for them. It made them a better competitor. You've got the whole cell phone industry spawned because of that. I was a lawyer for MCI at the time. I know exactly what happened. Consumer rates go down. These agencies don't have those resources, and we need to make sure that happens. Grassley and I have a bill. Senator Grassley and I have a bill to do that.
Senator,
secondly,
what do you make of the idea, actually, that...
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, what do you make of the idea actually that maybe there's more innovation than we think? And the reason I even suggest that is, you know, TikTok was something that if I said that phrase to you 2 years ago, you would have looked at your watch. If I had said Clubhouse to you, which is an emerging social platform, even 3 months ago, you would have talked about an actual Clubhouse, meaning there are people doing relatively innovative things and actually gaining market share in some regard.
There are, and this is one of the most exciting things about America's economy. But let me be clear, I don't want to punish success. When we talk about structural remedies and breaking things up, those companies would then be unleashed to do even more. And my concern is that while we're seeing really good things happening, we also know there's really bad things happening. And part of that is that we don't have the remedies in place. We don't have the resources I mentioned for the agencies, and some of the legal standards just don't fit the sophisticated marketplace we see today. And you have court rulings where the courts have gotten more and more restrictive about antitrust cases. And this isn't just consumers coming to me. There's a bunch of businesses, big and small, that know this is unfair for them if they can't get their product advertised the way that they would, or they're unable to compete in a marketplace. And so all this is balancing things out again.